Hello, welcome to Lackless Reactions. I'm your Lackless Reactor, finally talking about Zero Season 3. Sorry for the delay, it's been a long past few months for me. Either way, let's jump in and begin our examination of this season, shall we? Before we get into the battles, let me actually give my view of the season. Overall, I liked it. However, I do not know if it was the pacing or because we were dealing with 6 battles at once, or I was in the middle of moving, or what, but there are times I did find it a little slow. Now, don't get me wrong, I love slow burns, but on the other side, what we were dealing with, or at least dealing with in the second half, was action, and action scenes should not feel slow. And it's not as if I did not enjoy it either, I just don't know. If someone actually watches this video, they are going to have to tell me if they felt the same way. But either way, I enjoyed the season, so let's go in depth on what I think of the characters. That's how these videos always end up anyway. We'll be dividing my talks based on fights, so I'm starting with the 2 Gluttony fights because they are the ones I have the least to talk about. And I have nothing to say about Julius or Ricardo. Do I have something to say about Otto? Otto's a good boy, but he did not do anything which would not just be me giving a play-by-play for the fights. So let me skip him today too. So, Gluttony. Of the 4 Sin Archbishops we came to fight this season, they are the ones we get the least of. Now, don't get me wrong, they are public enemy number 1 still for what they did to Rem, and we get to see various interesting things of their powers, but we are not given backstory or the inner depths of why. Which makes sense. We are dealing with this big mess in a future season, but for now they are the 4th wheel. 5th, 6th, you get it. Mostly Gluttony just fought this season, not even entering the town before they took over the towers and committing to the earlier fights, except as a distraction we do not get to watch. So the big thing was their 2 fights. The fight at the 4th tower, the one which we get the least on, and the unexpected ambush in town. Through these 2 we get more explanation on their powers, seeing firsthand as take the names of the nameless soldiers, as well as see them eject Felt because they do not know her real name, but also see how powerful their authority is. They do not only steal the memories of those they consume, but they can use what they've eaten against in a fight. Roy Alfard shows that they have mastery over many skills through the memories they eat, becoming a master in all forms of combat through those memories. Roy and Lai Batenkaitos, I should know that one. Lai Batenkaitos show the connections to the memories themselves, able to take the names known by the people they eat, as well as use the memories to confuse the people who cannot remember what they have forgotten. That was the second big twist then. They are not only 2, but 3. Rui Orneb. The sins have been broken up before, Dante's Inferno separating those of greed into misers and spendthrifts, but seeing Gluttony chosen as one who is many is interesting. Either way, it has turned our memory eater into a small army now, and I can already tell you Subaru needs to find some way to separate them if he wants a chance of winning. So Gluttony, while the lesser of the 4 sins this time, showed brightly why they are going to be the large threat they are meant to be later. But this was not their time to shine, just an aperitif before the full course is yet to come. Today, this was everyone else's show. But while the fight had little development for most characters, special mention goes out to Felt. No, there was no advancement in Felt's character. She has her usual self, being the freedom candidate, saying whatever it is she wants to say and not letting herself just be a quiet damsel in distress when she is captured. However, pieces did begin to fall into place of the wider narrative. We learned that Wilhelm left the Knights after the princess was kidnapped around 15 years ago, with her body never being discovered and Cappella taking on her name. But with this simple piece of information, one other mysterious piece falls into place: Reinhardt's loyalty. When he saw her with the sigil for the royal selection, he instantly changed his mind of just letting Felt go, and took her away, to what we later learned was to make her the candidate to the royal selection. Now, I am not sure how the puzzle pieces exactly fit together, and with being Reinhardt, he likely used a divine blessing to skip a few steps in the chain of deductive reasoning and get to a conclusion. That being that Felt is the original Cappella, and therefore the true heir. I could also mention Gluttony being unable to eat her name, but come on, if anyone did not know that Felt was likely not a birth name at this point, I don't know what to tell you. So while not character development, there has been some plot development in the Felt camp, even though it is likely that only Reinhardt knows it at this time. We have to see in the future if being the actual heir gives Felt any advantage, but for now, nice additional tryst to those paying attention. Now I move on to the suppression force of lust, which brings into a separate fight against the corpses. Considering the pieces in this spell, I think the best person to start with is Garfield. Garf went through it this season. After being the one to put down the Battle Hunter last time, he has begun experiencing PTSD, having her image follow him wherever he goes. And not only that, he finds his mom, the mother that left and never came back, survived the carriage being crushed by rocks, but lost memories in the process. She was found by a passing cart, got married, and had 2 children, meaning our gorgeous tiger also has to face his long-standing trauma and the fact he has new siblings as well. But in the positive column, he found himself a girlfriend, or more accurately, one found him. The moment Mimi met him, she was all over him, being the person there when he needed it, and giving him absolutely no options against them being the official, unofficial couple. We might need to talk about this next season. However, halfway through the season, she becomes wounded, severe enough that she likely would have died if the triplets did not have the ability to split injuries between them. But Garf blamed himself for her being there in the first place, and for not being able to stop her from being injured, all of it taking a heavy psychological toll on him. So when we reach the battle, Garfield fighting because he has someone to save, but he already failed to save her. He has to prove himself against one of the greatest fighters known to have ever lived, while he hears the whispers of the one who he once killed in his ear. And the fight reflects this, the tide starting clearly against him, his opponent barely showing him any of his full strength. Until the moment, breaking to the ground, he finds himself surrounded by civilians, including his 2 half-siblings. In front of him is a mad mob beast, which has no qualms about eating everyone in the room, as well as a shadow of the Battle Hunter taunting him. And, with his half-siblings behind him, he attacks, saving them and breaking the curse. Then, to the cheers of Glorious Tiger, then with his opponent fully taking him seriously, he fights against a threat that it took Wilhelm at his best to defeat. And with all eyes on the fight, Garfield emerged victorious. Garf's main story arc this season was his feelings of inferiority and his steps outside his isolated home and starts to swim with the big fish. And despite being kicked around all season, the man managed to end on a win, and with a girlfriend. It was glad to see him finally push through the Battle Hunter once more to emerge a better man in the end. All hail the Glorious Tiger. We begin this season where, for the first time in a long time, Wilhelm and Reinhardt are in the same room together. So let's now talk about the entirety of the Van Astra family. Yes, all of them in one entry, because if we didn't, we'd be jumping around on those specific traumas a lot. So let's just do this as once. But with them in the same room together, it's clear there's tension between them. And it gets worse when the father and son come in. Well, the father slash son, father to one son. You know what I mean. Heinkel, to taunt to and be especially rude to his own son. Shortly afterward, Wilhelm reveals to Subaru that because of the time Reinhardt received his powers, many blame him for the death of his mother at the hands of the White Whale. And without directly saying so, Wilhelm hints that he hasn't fighting these feelings himself. But he wants to reconnect with his grandson, no matter how much of a task that is. A wrench in the plan comes when the Richard's cult takes over the city. This especially grinds to a halt as it is identified that one of the two cult members is recognized as Theresia, the former sword saint. And how much we learn about her this season. Man, she just wanted to grow flowers. That is all she ever wanted. But she could never have it because as the sword saint, she was tied to specific duties. And her trying to run away from those duties is what got her entire family killed to begin with, forcing her to just be a killing machine until the young Wilhelm saves her. And for about 30 years she is allowed to live a normal life. But duty and the White Whale come calling. And so she left home, with promises to come back. And this is where she lost her powers. And with her death, we had the family completely split. Reinhardt was given a duty he did not ask for, and was cursed to go down the same blood-filled path as his mother. Some blamed Reinhardt for his mother's death, a sentiment Wilhelm felt but tried so long to suppress the feeling. And Heinkel, he fully blamed his son, after losing both his mother as well as being passed over as the power of the sword saint. And for years the Von Astra family was shattered. Which brings us to the modern day, when two are trying to bury the hatchet, and one is a drunken mess, only for the witches called to attack, and for them to realize that when the mass carcass, the corpse brought back to the fight, includes Theresia. The two are divided into different teams. On Reinhardt's side, he does play well with the fight against Regulus, and took to the moon, and he was the one who finished off the Archbishop, sinking him deep into the ground to drown his sorrows. But the real story takes place across town, where it is Wilhelm who is up against Theresia, up against the woman he loves, the one who he became the master swordsman he is, so that he could take the woman who only wanted to plant flowers from the battlefield. The one who he cannot stand seeing her corpse desecrated by this necromancy, and wants to send her back to sleep. But he can't, because she is the woman he loves and gave everything for. How can he kill her? Even now. And so, the duty falls to the sword saint once more. She was his grandmother. She was his predecessor. She was the woman he had been accused of murdering for most of his life. There was no way Reinhardt found nothing as he drew his sword, as he brought it down, as his grandfather begged him not to do it. But he is a sword saint. Whatever he is feeling, no matter how much he likely cried when he was alone, he showed none of it on his face in the battlefield. And so Theresia was allowed to sleep again, and it only cost the entire Von Austria family. Even if it was what was needed to be done, Wilhelm watched a person he was trying for so many years to not blame for murdering his wife, murder his wife. That final break with Reinhardt, the dutiful sword saint, declaring the ashes to be just a corpse, a monster that needed to be put down, with Wilhelm holding close the ashes of his wife, someone who had been alive in his eyes until the wound inflicted by Reinhardt stole her last breath. And Heinkel, who had no idea what is going on and or he knows that his mother is dead again. It was tragic to see the slow and methodical way that von Astra family was torn apart by the cruel wheels of fate. Despite their willingness to bury the hatchet at the beginning, I think it's safe to say such a time has now passed. Next up, we walk away from the false battle against lust to the actual battle against lust. Lust ambush, where we unfortunately have two selection candidates which we have little to say about. Anastasia was a good part of why the candidates were assembled here to begin with, her having what all of the others wanted, but she remains distant and lacks the ability to fight that we have seen. Chrush, on the other hand, just continues to march from her life going from bad to worse, being infected by dragon's blood and disfigured, spending the second half bedridden, not even being able to say she did much in the first half. So instead, we start with the Lady of Dow herself, Cappella Emeralda Laguniga. Please ignore that the name is taken of the missing heir to the crown, and surely it means nothing, especially since we know that Felch is the real Cappella. The Archbishop of Lust herself and a part-time dragon. Cappella is interesting, so let us start by looking at her powers. She is able to shift a form and, apparently, the form of others. We have not seen the latter on screen, thankfully, but the results are horrifying in and of themselves. The dragon's blood was close, though that was a blood's own strength and not her authority of lust, so that doesn't count. So what does she use her powers for? Well, outside of the constant shifting of her body in order to best use it in combat, she shifts herself to taunt her enemies, because lust. She does not believe in deeper emotions connecting people, and sees human interactions as shallow and base. For transforming into just their types or a specific individual she knows they fancy, and using that as a psychological attack against them. Speaking of psychological attack, the other way she uses her abilities to warp others into the forms of monsters, making them to be grotesque as possible. A very effective attack, as it taunts opponents with the fact that they are killing humans, as well as that she would be able to warp them in the same way if they lose to her. And one more psychological mention, her original attack on the city was using a magia to transfer her voice across the town, taunting all the survivors with their impending death or worse. Which, in connection to the feedback loop made by Wrath, is dreadfully effective. Outside of that, we know little about her, especially since we never see the true her. But one thing is safe to say, she is both a physical powerhouse because of abilities, but also a sadist with everything she needs to be a psychological destroyer. Her monsters, her forms, her voice, even likely the name she is borrowing, all calculated to do the most harm. At this point, with Regulus gone, Cappella is likely the most dangerous member of the Witch's cult outside of Pandora herself. And then we have the biggest question this season, Al. We only had Al briefly in the past, so when we get him again, many were just suspecting a random friendly guy. Even if one of the cheat times, which I did not end up watching on camera but watched him off screen, where he admitted that he was also brought over from Japan, there was little surprise. But then he started doing things. He seemed to be sneaking off to take care of the plot behind the scenes, as if he knew what was going to happen and where he needed to be. The fight against Lust 2, his way of avoiding the attacks and shrugging off her games made it seem like he saw it coming. Which, okay, he was given time-based abilities too. Need to be wary in case they are also from the Witch of Envy, but still not too bad. But then he also talks to Subaru's friends in a familiar manner, even in the same short mentioned earlier, calling Beatrice by her nickname, which she objects that he is not close enough to call her that. Which, combined with the way he just sometimes says things in a way that's similar to the way Subaru would say it, makes the pieces fit together suspiciously. While it's not definite yet that Al is a future Subaru, and indeed some factors lead to this potentially being a red herring, there's still a reason to be suspicious of Al and what his plans actually are. Then we move on to the second largest fight, the raid against Wrath, led by Precilla. Precilla is another royal candidate that we have not dealt with much before now, with our only real exposure being the bits in Arc 3. So this was our true first time look at how she really is. While she comes off as stuck up in all her previous in the previous interactions with her, she's just as indignant as the other candidates at how Heinkel treats his family, knocking him down a few pegs like the rest of them. We also get to see her first interaction with Lilliana, and she is instantly for someone living their own truth, being nothing but praiseworthy of the girl. When she strikes when the people need calming, she's one of the first to suggest Lilliana block out wrath through her singing, and she herself is not afraid to chase away the darkness of dancing. All in all, the pieces come together to show one who does have an inflated self-worth, but who has actually done what is needed to prove she actually is worth that much. And even as the rich candidate, she's ready to support others and stand by her people in the mud if it will fix the problem at hand. Or, as we see this season, charge into the battlefield herself, if that's what needs to be done. Which we also see as she volunteers to take on Wrath herself, with the songstress as her backup. She brings out her sword and fights in a blaze of glory. And while Wrath is maybe not the most physically imposing of the archbishops, Precilla's fighting makes it likely she is the strongest physically of the candidates, outside of maybe Emilia. That said, there are still some loose ends to tie up to Precilla. During the battle, Wrath mentions the name of various things, sounding like fairy tales, and this seems to get under Priscilla's skin. What was the meaning of that, and how and how long will it be before we can find an answer to what seems to be Priscilla's deepest secrets? That is the question. All in all, Precilla was a candidate outside of Emilia who was able to show up the most this season. And I'm not just talking about the fan service. Definitely a favorite to win. It would be interesting to see if she and our main characters are ever first to blows. And alongside everyone's favorite candidate is Lilliana, our songstress, and who is one of the central characters to the entire season if you think about it. Even without combat abilities, it was clear from the beginning she had a pull to her, which would make her invaluable against Wrath. She once was a member of a traveling troupe who sang and performed for people, but she wanted more than the humble performances and wanted to see the big city. When that went against the path her people were traveling, she walked away. We get to see how she traveled over the years, struggling to get by, but refusing to give up and even tossing away a chance to reconnect with her family. That was until the day on the verge of her body collapsing. She saw the sunrise and fell in love with life, giving her the ability to do what she had failed to do, sing from her heart. And afterwards, between then and now, she did find her way to the city and did meet with one of the most important people therein, who fell head over heels in love with her, and from a brief look we saw them together, she gave him back. By the time the group arrived in the city, she is one of the most famed celebrities in the city. When you first see her, she is a goofy character, but as we see the city panicking from the attack, enhanced through Wrath's power and the constant threats from lust, she is the only one who has a control of her own emotions to bring peace to others who are fearful. It is not only useful when we are dealing with scared civilians, but also when taking on Sirius herself. Standing atop the tower wreathed in flames, singing her heart out to the crowd, Lilliana played a crucial role in neutralizing the strongest advantage of Wrath, leading to just a straight fight between Sirius and Precilla. And the best part is, the song she was singing was the same first song, the song she first performed when she opened her heart after seeing that sunrise. The beautiful voice that was the bedrock of her rise to fame is also the greatest weapon against one of the archbishops. When dealing with her attitude most days, I like to think fans built up an unneeded dislike to our songstress due to her comic relief nature. But she was a necessary part, the image of her of truly bringing people together as opposed to the shallow imitation of Wrath's power. She is one we are likely going to leave behind when we go, but our time with her certainly proved she deserved every second of screen time she was given. We then come to our third Archbishop and first threat we meet this season, Sirius Romani Conti, the wife of Beetlejuice, which leads to theories of who is under those bandages and how much mental strain it will find itself on Emilia's shoulders when we find out. But I am going to put aside that theory crafting for this one to just deal with one of the bishops who we get the most of. She appears on the first episode, being the first sign that something is wrong. After an episode of everything seemingly going fine, if you set aside Heinkel, then in a masterful display of scenery, we saw her slowly take control of the crowd and then kill them in a single second. Her power is delightfully evil, which connects people through feelings. Usually she uses it on a crowd along with her own delusions to whip them up in a frenzy of her own making. An example being the disturbing first death in episode 1. The eerie calm and good nature of the crowd listening to someone who proclaims herself of the witch's cult. And of course, it also comes with the ability to chain physical damage, making it so that she can kill whole crowds of people just by killing one, or make it so that if anyone successfully kills her, hundreds of civilians would die with her. Now for the first few episodes of the season, we saw how threatening her powers were. Actually, she was the only one who actually managed to kill Subaru this time around, and do so 3 times. Even though Regulus and Cappella were considered the biggest threats this season, Sirius is just as serious a threat as any of them. That said, the other two being more of the focus this season means that there is only so much more we can say about Sirius. When she fought Precilla and the songstress, they pretty much counted everything she had on hand. And in the end, she was one of the 2 archbishops who was defeated and also captured. Again, it's good to see when those bandages come off, but she's neutralized for now. But limiting her as a full threat does not mean she was any less of a threat. She ran on carnage this entire season, and she is not dead yet. It's not going to be a long time until we see the bride of Beetlejuice cut swaths of destruction yet again. Probably just until we get to season 4. Or farther, I'm not sure when she comes back. And now our final battle approaches, which we start with the final Archbishop instead of save him for last. Everyone, Regulus, the little prince himself. Regulus was a danger we were expecting since we first saw him in Season 2's flashback to Emilia's past. We saw how he was a vanguard working with, who was tricked by Pandora to attack the hidden village. There was where we first witnessed his ability at work, which we get into his ability in Season 3, but let's take a full look right while we are on the topic. It is rather simple. He's able to stop time for everything he touches, including himself. which when used effectively allows him to cause as much trouble as another right-haired psychopath accelerator from the Index series, after having most damage washed off of him. But the trade-off is that stopping his body includes his heart, which gives rise to the secondary ability of his, to place his heart in the body of an ally, specifically one of his brides, which is where his main issue and where his main evil comes from. His need to have one bride or brides, and his ego leads him collecting women to make into his living dolls. Those who he does not love, but he thinks they look pretty. Those who he cares not the opinions of, because he has rights, and he will tell you for hours how much he has rights. And so he kidnaps the girls, likely with a bloody pile where their family once stood, taking them back with him, abuses them under threat of death, and forces them to live how he commands them. And a reminder that when the brides were given a chance to speak freely about him, they all universally hated him. When they learned what his power was, they all, without hesitation, came to the conclusion of ending their lives instead of having a piece of him inside them. That is how much he is universally reviled. After being shipped away in the past, he returns again in the present and starts one of the greatest conflicts this season. He declares Emilia his bride and kidnaps her. And as we see his controlling behavior, as we see him push his ideals on his wife and slowly takes away even their ability to smile, we see him slowly build up to be the most difficult to defeat member of the witch's cult. Until he is not. Sure, he was one of the two threats we needed Reinhardt to deal with for a while. Indeed, he was able to send Reinhardt away for 5 minutes by sending him to the moon. But once he has everything taken from him and his trick is out in the open, he finds himself on the end of an episode-long smackdown and finds himself crushed under the weight of his own securities. And water. Lots of water. And the final nail in the coffin. His last thoughts are about how Emilia must have did all of this to take revenge on him for his attack long ago. But Emilia does not recognize him. To Emilia, he was no one, and even in death, he was just another mad member of the witch's cult. Not a nemesis, not a nightmare that will always be remembered, but a man not even worth remembering. Truly, Regulus was a scary opponent, but the true horrifying detail is that there are people out there who will say this is exactly how men should treat women and probably rooted for Regulus. Which, in the end, that's the thing, is it not? The witches cult are all dark reflections of Subaru, who in turn saw it as a representation of the worst of us in the audience. The utter clash of Regulus and his mastery of his master of all women attitude, in turn is a redemption of Subaru, who once treated Emilia like something he was owed, which we'll get to more when we talk about Subaru. Now we finish off with our two main characters, Emilia and Subaru. We'll go with Emilia first. Emilia continues to show her growth this season, being involved with the biggest battle this season, and pushing past the deadlock Wrath had trapped Subaru in. But more important than anything else was the fact that she was kidnapped. As one would expect from the main heroine being kidnapped, everything was set up for our princess to languish in a tower, helpless and needing our main prince to save her. But this is Emilia. And this is the Emilia after she faced the Echidna Shrine. Did anyone who had been paying attention to the story just expect Emilia to roll over and become useless until Subaru did something? First, she kept it calm. Some of it might have been attributed to last remnants of naivete, but even Emilia at her worst would have recognized a man who changed her clothes and declared she was his wife after kidnapping her was a bundle of red flags. But she managed to stay neutral, not confirming or denying his delusions until she had a better understanding. Then she was proactive, doing what she could to sneak around to get information and relay it to the outside world. She also talked to one wife assigned to watch over her, trying to encourage her to rebel even if that effort was one which found deaf ears until after the scales had been tipped. When the wedding came about, she does not hold back on Regulus, letting him know clearly she has no love for him and has no intention of marrying him. And again, this is a Sin Archbishop and someone all the girls she interacted with are utterly terrified of. She could have died if Subaru and Reinhardt had not showed up at that moment. But instead of playing it safe and trying to save her own skin, she was true to herself and trusted Subaru would be there for her when she needed him. But even more so, it was her dealing with the other brides that was the highlight of Emilia's performance the entire season. She was the one who, when the battle with Regulus was raging, convinced them to let their true feelings out. And when, in their despair, they all collectively holding knives to their throats, ready to do whatever it took to flee Regulus, she was the one who showed truly her mastery of her talents, freezing them all in order to remove their bodies as options from Regulus, but doing so in a way that kept them all alive, making sure that it was Regulus's death which allowed them to part, not their own. But while her patience, honesty, and skills are all commendable, it was cathartic to see Emilia be the one to mostly be the first to beat Regulus up when his power was off. One strike for every bride, including herself. Yes, Reinhardt did come and get in the final blow, but Emilia still stands as a top candidate you do not wish to get in a fight with. It has been a year since Emilia has passed through Echidna's tomb, and the amount of growth that event managed to instill in her is crystal clear this season. It is no longer a case of Subaru just one-sidedly saving Emilia anymore. They have reached a point where they are perfectly in sync when together, and where Emilia can more than hold her own whenever they are apart. And we end this off with our main character, the continuous growth of Subaru. Though this time it was less a growth record and more of the rewards of his own actions. Since his start from zero, Subaru has become a changed man, with being a white whale, overcoming Beetlejuice, and taking his authority from himself, and learning to rely on others in Echidna's village. Subaru has now grown into an actual, respectable protagonist as opposed to where we started. And the show even takes the time to give him his reward, halfway through the season having him be the one to rally the citizens in hope, using the achievements that he has rightfully gained, but also the emotions he had let himself open up to. He has officially reached a point where people are willing to follow him, because he is the Knight of Emilia, the one who fights the witch's cult. He is respected. Also, he has an incredibly low death count this time, only 3, in part because how tricky Wrath was to deal with at the start. And he also has a dragon blood problem, which, let me say this now, he will absorb more from Chrush in the future and get whatever benefits come from being a shriveled prune. But overall, despite facing off against 4 Sin Archbishops, everything went relatively well this season. And specifically for the battle against Regulus, despite the overwhelming advantage his powers gave him, Subaru, without needing to use Return by Death, methodically analyzed his powers and managed to solve not just what it did, but its weakness. And in his once-an-off use of Invisible Hand, he managed to put an end to the power without killing Emilia, though he left the actual smackdown to the beasts of his team. I wish I could speak more on Subaru, but again, this was a season of reward as opposed to a season of growth. Subaru earned the praise, earned the trust, earned the victory, and earned the power of greed, which I can already see him using in his connection with his friends as opposed to the creepy bride business, but that's for us to see next season. Which brings us to an end. Another great season of Raid Zero, and I look forward to the next one. We have set the score of greed and have a few more to settle with gluttony and lust. I look forward to whatever problems comes to our characters next time. And more than that, I look forward to seeing how Emilia and Subaru handle it together. Until next time.